Oh, thank you, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. It's nice to see you all here on this beautiful ship. But this is the only part of the ship where there's not quite enough room, I believe. But as Liam says, my name is Richard Heyman. I'm a U.S. Coast Guard licensed merchant marine officer, and I've worked on ships most of my life so far. And currently, I'm a captain of a research vessel, which is a three-masted sail ship, which is up in dry dock in Spain. So I just had to come along with you on this trip. And I've been all around these isles many times, so it's my pleasure to return to some of these ports and talk about it. And some people say, well, am I English? Can't you tell? Well, I don't know. I'm an American born in New Mexico, living in New York, and I'm of mixed, what I call noble mongrel, having my family name is English, my mother has a Welsh name, I have Irish, German, and a little Chinese thrown in there somewhere. So I'm happy to share the world with everybody else. And the more you travel around the world, as you know, you realize the interest and the value of all these places and the goodness of people naturally. So you come to the UK, like we're doing, and it's a great education just to see the activity of this modern country matched with all of the history, which is layered upon itself. And Newcastle is just one of many wonders we'll see here. Now, just from a personal note, my wife is a puppeteer and a stage designer and a director. And when this ship was being built, she was hired as a stage director and a designer for some of the shows that are on board. And so I didn't get to go along on that inaugural voyage of this ship many years ago. And now she's teaching, and I said, well, this is the time you can call in sick and play hooky for. But she said, well, no, I've already been on the ship. Well, I think it's actually more fantastic than most ships I've ever been on. It's truly full of joy, which is not the case on my ship. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you about Newcastle, which I always remember the first time I came into Newcastle from traveling across Scandinavia, and I was in Sweden, Norway, and I had a smattering of Norwegian. I could go around and talk to people. I arrived on the ferry from Bergen to Newcastle, and I couldn't understand a word they said. So I'll leave that for your judgment later, but it's the town. We've steamed all the way from Dover all the way up the North Sea, east coast of England, and now we're coming into Newcastle. The proper name is Newcastle on Tyne because that's the river that it is on. There are many other shorter names for it. Gordie is the local name for it, which is another story. But here we are. We're up in the far corner near the border with Scotland, and it is the major city of Northumbria. That's this district of England. And this is a rolling hill country. It's not quite as high as Scotland, but it's getting to be rough and craggy up here. And then there's a variegated coast and a lot of flats and what they call fens, swamplands along the North Sea all the way up the coast. Here's Newcastle and its surrounding towns. Maybe one of the towns you live in is named after one of these places because typical, especially in New England and Canada and Australia, you have all of these same names out there on the desert or on the prairie, but of course we're coming just in the town. Notice Whitley Bay. That's the home originally of Captain Cook. He was a Gordie, as they call them. Then he went around the world. This is the town center. There will be docking off in industrial docks down further river by the sea, but then we'll come into the main town, which has its medieval street layout. Now, this is a very ancient town, goes back to the Roman period. It was called Pons Aurelius, which was the bridge over the River Tyne back when it was a Roman outpost and a fortress. But it's grown, of course, into a modern metropolis over the centuries. But it's all centered around the River Tyne. Now, here's the motto of the town, which is Fortita defendit triumphans, which means in Latin, we are going to defend this place against, the Scots, the Picts, the Danes, the other cruise ships, whatever it is. But I go back. Notice the seahorses. They're almost drawn by Disney. Well, it truly is in the center of the city. It's a town of castles because the conflicts of England are so many. I call these the contested isles because they've been fought over for millennia, and now there's good arguments going on, which you can read about in the papers over all kinds of things. So it's islands where many cultures and peoples have clashed and fought over it, but the castles of Newcastle are mostly from the Norman conquest. And so the son, Robert Culthred of William the Conqueror, led the Norman army north, vanquished the Anglo-Saxons in battles up to get into Northumbria, and then set up the castle keep of Newcastle in the late 1100s, and then they built it up later and it became stronger. But this was what in English history is called the Norman yoke, which was the cruel Normans who were from, of course, Normandy, but they were originally from Ålesund, Norway. So they came and almost conquered Paris, took over Normandy, then invaded at Hastings, England, and then they marched north. And then they ended up fighting other Vikings over this land, which is another story. But the Norman rule was cruel in that it wasted the land and vanquished all enemies, and then led to the peaceful country it is today. Much of England is still owned by the inheritors of the Norman lords who were given big parts of England for their service to the king. Well, anyway, in the medieval city, there are the fortifications, the walls. There's an area called Wall's End, which was actually the end of the Hadrian's Wall. So the Romans were here, the Normans were here, and now the T-shirt vendors are here. And so you have the keep, which is a very dramatic center of the town. Then there's the cathedral, and you can go in, you'll have all these, the ship has so many tours and so many places that I can't begin to touch on all of the variety of things you can see, but everybody should go at least to the castle and the keep, which has that medieval air that we so enjoy. So you can go into the dungeon, go up in the parapets and all of that. And it's in pretty good condition considering it's only 900 years old, like my house. But it was ruins for a long time, and so back in the Victorian era, they were sort of a spook house and off limits because these ruins were not maintained, they were not open to the public, they were treacherous, and so these are old illustrations of getting a torchlight tour in the middle of the night and the stories of yore and ghosts and such. And then the Industrial Revolution happened, and you have suddenly trains and factories, and Newcastle became a major economic force, primarily because of the coal that was dug in Northumbria. And so even today, the railroad tracks have to kind of skirt around medieval ruins that are being saved. Then outside of the area, you have many other sites. This is Alwood Castle, which is perhaps the best kept full enclosed keep and grounds, and this is also on the tour because it has a lot of activities in this great medieval castle. And like a lot of them, they've devolved from a family to the National Trust, and now they're heritage listed properties, and they are maintained by the National Lottery, and then they're open to the public, and they have all kinds of cafes and lodges, and typical all over the UK. So this is the great charm of visiting this part of the world, is you have living history that is not just ruins like in other parts of the world, but it's actually kept up and active, and you can go and enjoy the poison garden. And then they have the witch's brew, and they have sort of Harry Potter-like entertainments in there, so I'm sure some of you will enjoy that. Here's one of the interiors that they've designed as a cafe in the old keep. So this is Fantasyland partly. Some of you may go on the excursion down to York. Now this is just south of Newcastle. It's not the industrial center, but this is an important city that was on the River Ouse, and then up the river in the 800s came the Vikings. Now they first came up to Lindisfarne from Norway on their summer vacation and went shopping, and they conquered the Abbey of Lindisfarne, which is out on the peninsula. They surrounded it with their Viking boats. They razed it. They killed what became St. Cuthbert, and he's now venerated in the Durham Cathedral if you go on that trip out further to the west. They laid ruin, and it's still a monument to the medieval Christianity that was assaulted by the Vikings. And this is a history that is still palpable because Just the next county south of Northumbria is Yorkshire, and the people in that area are very much seem more Scandinavian than what they call the Southies, all of those tropical people who live down near London. And this was what York was looked like in the late 800s when it became a Viking trading post to Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and part of the great economic maritime trade routes of that era to Scandinavia. By the way, the name York, it actually means Jorvik in Old Norse, which means the bay where the earl or the lord lived. So it became the capital town, and so it got contracted in English to York. And then you could say, I live in the New York Viking pirate capital. But here's York. Some of you are going to go on the excursion there. And again, it's kept its medieval walls fairly well. The Minster manors and different museums. And I remember going up there.
I'll use this one.
Oh, okay.
Is that better?
All right, thank you.
Well, here, it's me. Now I can whisper. Well, once upon a time. There was considerable conflict over all of this territory. And again, it's a north-south thing, and there have been a number of civil wars in England and around the area, but this was the center for the War of the Roses, where the Plantagenet and the Tudors fought. And if you have interest, there's a good book just recently published called War of the Roses, which describes the intrigue of all of this. And all I can say is English history gets more complicated than I can stay awake. But I was there up on the walls at one of these museums many years ago, and a young man was recounting the tales and the captures and the slaughters and all the terrible things of the time. But he only spoke in the present tense, which is the way of history that sometimes these wars never end, especially among the historians. Well, that's an interesting town. It just has a number of remains of that era, and also they've recently dug out Viking era archaeology right downtown. They were building a building, and they dug down, and typical in England, they find layers of this, that, and the other. So they have a Viking museum right in the center of town called the Jorvik Center. And similarly in Leicester, they just found digging in a parking lot, they found the remains of my ancestor Richard III. And he's just been reinterred in Leicester Cathedral. But you can go up to the Clifford Tower, part of the York fortifications, and there's, again, the medieval walls around the center of the town, and the Minster, beautiful English Gothic style. Now, I know you're not going to see everything. That's my pleasure to show you things you will not see, even if they don't really exist. But this is very palpable, though. The old medieval town of York, it's better preserved than Newcastle, which had a lot of urban removal of its core city, unfortunately. But in York, you still have buildings that date from the 1300s and become little shops and cafes. And I believe there's an excursion to Betty's Tea House. So this is a high tea in the English style. And so you can go and enjoy well, I don't think they have as much ashore as they have on this ship, but you can still go try it out, as they say. But be careful who you have for tea. Well, I'm going to go back to Newcastle upon Tyne. And so, this city had been just like York, a dense medieval town with merchants and goods coming through. And fortunately, these old engravings don't have what's called smell-o-vision. But then they started building the bridges, the railroads, the mines, and so Newcastle became a major economic center for all of that trade, and particularly sending coal from the north down to the factories of the south and off to the rest of the world. So much of this is now not in the center city, like many other places in the world. The economy has changed, the infrastructure has changed, and so some of these scenes are not there anymore. It's all highways and big box stores and things like that. But when you go into the town, much of the original road work is there, and some of the districts are still there, particularly in an area called Grangertown, which is the center of the town, which mostly dates from the Georgian period, where they replaced the medieval wooden buildings with stone, elegant buildings like these. These are paintings of the period back when there was a little more smog to add visual effect. But now, like much of the UK, the coal has been replaced with natural gas for heating and industrial purposes, so it is a lot cleaner than it used to be just a few decades ago. And now this is the main street in Grangertown coming up to Gray Monument. And this gentleman who has a good perch over town was the leading industrialist and constructed much of the industry of the area and also built a lot of buildings in the center city. We know him as Sir Earl Grey in the morning with your tea. And then again, another view of Grangertown in the heart of the city where you can walk around. And again, the city sprawls quite a bit, but it has a lot of the leftover beautiful Georgian rows like these and the chimney tops with Dick Van Dyke dancing. And of course, I'm sorry to say it's not going to snow when of course northern England becomes more tranquil. But you can go into one of the pubs and taste the local fine. Not wine, it's beer. Oh no, ale, properly ale. But this is the most famous ale in the country actually. And then the city sprawls out, and particularly it has a big new football stadium. So. But as I said, a lot of the city was knocked down and built in a kind of grotesque way. This is sort of a brutesque building from the 1960s, which there was a tremendous scandal because the city government was knocking down block after block, driving people out of the center city, and found that it was an inside trader scheme. And so the principal developer and government officials were sent to jail finally when the accounting caught up with them. But what it did is leave let's say, the less charming architecture sitting right next to some of the most beautiful buildings. Now, right downtown again, you have this tremendous bridge, which is a rail bridge, but that is actually the model for the Harbor Bridge in Sydney. And this is the hallmark of Newcastle, all its beautiful bridges and engineering. This is the Millennial Bridge built for the year 2000, and one of many things that were built around the UK to commemorate that particular year, and then they built pedestrian bridges over here. So this is a curious picture I found of a arched pedestrian bridge, and then that car came thinking it could get over it, but it couldn't get up the steps, obviously. And then there's a lively cultural community. Let's say a lot of musicians, artists. This is what's called the Needle, which is a sculptural array within one of the parks. And then there's the, I would say, animated population. These are the Gordies. And they're in the UK, they're considered a part to themselves because they developed a way of speaking which is partly Scandinavian, partly, I don't want my parents to understand what I'm talking about, and something that would distinguish them from other people from around the UK. And so this was a rough town in previous times, not so rough these days. I mean, kids do grow up, well, until they come on a ship like this. And then they have their hometown heroes. This is Sting and Police Band, and a lot of music comes out of Newcastle, Duran Duran, AC/DC, and then other ones that are not classical music now. And then the enthusiasm of the youth is usually what propels a whole society. And in this case, she's urging on the local team, which is the Newcastle United. Any football fans in here? Well, it's I always cheer for all the teams, so I'm hoping they'll all win. But this is, of course, the passion of the UK and particularly all of the rest of Europe, their own team, much of which are professional, and they're not actually locals. They're all hired on scouted out, and then the rowdies follow them wherever they go. And And then the other people, I'm going to finish up here with just a comment that Newcastle, like much of the UK, now has over 20% of non-ethnic British in the city. So you have Chinese, you have other Asians, you have Hindus and Africans and Americans, and then you can read in the paper again about the problems of the Muslim community and the integration of this society. And this is perhaps what happened 1,000 years ago when those Vikings came in and didn't get along also. But this is a palpable problem in the UK where, particularly in the north up here, is where the Independence Party and the other nationalists of the UK are very strong in the outer regions in the north and in the rural areas. So this is one of the rallies for the nationalist sentiment to limit immigration and to require English and not assimilate or not welcome more people. But of course, they're getting about 300,000 immigrants a year into the UK on top of 60 million people and no more land. So this is a very serious dispute. We may not run into this on our brief visits, but this city is considered a model of cooperation. It has a fair employment rate and good programs to try to teach the immigrants what they need to do to live here. And so these bridges sort of symbolize the larger community that can cooperate and can, let's say, live past the difficult history of the past into a present that is more cooperative. So I'll just leave you with another picture of what Newcastle is in the evening when people are hopefully in a better mood and cooperate, make this city and the UK in general a peaceful and happy country. I'm here on my own, as I said. My wife is busy working, teaching, but I'd be happy to talk to you later and see you around the ship, have a drink with you. It's my pleasure to be aboard, and welcome to Newcastle. Thank you very much.